Hey, what's going on, my friend? It's Jeff Newport from ChasingStrength.com. And in today's video, we are covering part 2 in our video series, Slowing Down for Faster Results This Year. Now, if you missed the first video in the series, we'll put a link in the video description, or maybe we can do one of those fancy things where we put something up around my head and you can click on it and go back and watch it if you haven't watched it already. All right. But we're discussing why you should actually slow down this year if you want faster results from your training, especially if you didn't see the results you wanted last year. Okay. And we're also discussing how to slow yourself down instead of being slowed down by injury. And the way to do that, well, we identify the reasons you'll get injured or why people get injured training in the first place and how to overcome them. So today in part 2, I'm going to cover something that I've seen repeatedly on forums, social media, and even Zoom calls. Now, what is it? Well, it's called poor technique. All right, I'm going to flash a picture up here on the screen. You'll see 5 people. That was the first Olympic weightlifting team that I was on. And it's hard to believe that that picture was taken in the summer of 1995. The guy second from the left is my first weightlifting coach, Mark Cohen, who insisted, like he was a stickler about learning proper technique, which is why I'm showing you this picture. And the guy second from the right, well, that's me. Okay, I was 22, I believe there. 22, is that right? 22. Okay, now, as I said, Mark was a stickler for technique, and he taught me the fundamentals of Olympic lifting technique. I mean, I thought my cleans were good enough, but they weren't. They weren't even close. They were some kind of ugly reverse curl that I bounced off my thighs, which explained why I had bruised quads, right? Bruised thighs every time I did hang cleans, which was like on a Thursday afternoon. And you know how much training with Mark cost me? All right. Well, I'll tell you, because a lot of guys don't want to take the time to invest in technique. They use just good enough technique or sloppy technique, which ends up getting them hurt, right? They pay nothing for it in the short run, and they pay lots of things for it in the long run. So back to how much it cost me to train with Mark. All right. At the time, I was making a whopping $6.50 an hour, working most of the time at the Rutgers College Gym. And I supplemented that with making $15 an hour as a personal training at the New York sports clubs in East Brunswick, New Jersey. So finding the $2.60 or whatever it was, I think it was like $2.65, right, for the New Jersey Turnpike toll. And that was one way, exit 16A, right? So what is that? That's like $5, $5.30 every Saturday plus gas, and sometimes during the week when I could swing it. Plus the 5 hours out of every Saturday was incredibly expensive for me at the time. Plus saying no to personal training clients on the very popular Saturday morning spots actually cost me probably $45, $50 a day, right, on Saturdays, which, man, that adds up. That's like an extra $200 a month, $250 a month, right? So it cost me, the opportunity costs to learn proper technique, right, were pretty steep at that time in my life. So why did I do it? Well, because I wanted to compete in Olympic lifting. I wanted to win a gold medal. And in order to do that, I needed to make sure my technique was not just good, but great, because I was already plenty strong. So I counted the cost, so to speak, right? And I made the necessary sacrifices. Now, unfortunately, even still, I did get hurt in Olympic lifting, and that was from pre-existing injuries and issues that I brought into that sport from my other sports. Now, hindsight being 2020, I didn't know nearly enough about how the human body operated, and I sure as heck didn't know how the body operated compared to what I know now. Okay, I didn't even think that those issues were issues. Okay, it never even factored into my thought processes at the time. Sure, I always wondered why my right foot turned out a little bit more than my left foot by the end of a squat session, and why my right glute was bigger than my left glute, and why my left quad, adductor, and hamstring was bigger than those muscles on my right side. But I didn't think it was an issue at all until after I accumulated more and more injuries, right, as I progressed through my 20s and into my early 30s. So, for example, here's an example of an injury. I strained my left rotator cuff, missing a jerk. So I missed a jerk out front, and I tried to save it by, muscling it down. And, well, that cost me 6 weeks of training. I couldn't go overhead because I strained my rotator cuff. Okay. Plus, what was interesting is at the time, so you turn your wrist over like this. It's called supination. At the time, my wrist never worked correctly, so I could never get it fully supinated, fully pronated. It'd get stuck kind of like right here. Okay. And I didn't know that was an issue. Okay. I broke my arm wrestling in 1989, and that's why I couldn't do that. So imagine taking those types of injuries into high speed, high velocity, high strength barbell lifting. Okay. So not the best formula for success. All right. Another example I subluxed my right patella. In other words, I popped my right patella out of place. Patella is your kneecap. Okay, I did that again on a front squat when I was training with Mark. Now, the first time was really bad. It got popped out for me. I actually ran up my leg, and that was again wrestling. I got zero rehab, but when I did it with Mark, it wasn't so bad, right? But my right knee still swelled up, and my right IT band still got really, really angry. Now, fortunately for me, because Mark was such a stickler on technique, I'm convinced that I would have gotten injured way more and probably would have had to retire much sooner and be carrying more injuries and have more fallout from those injuries in my 50s had he not been such a stickler and so insistent on learning the correct technique and letting the technique hold me back instead of my strength. Okay, so what's my point in sharing all these war stories with you, right? For lack of a better term. Well, many and maybe most, right? It would be fair to say, guys, as I said, use good enough kettlebell technique, okay? Or what I rather call good enough until it's not kettlebell technique. So what do I mean by that? Well, they don't even take the time to video themselves, which, by the way, was much harder back in 1995 because we didn't have, right, smartphones with cameras on them, right? So they don't even take the time to video themselves. I almost said videotape themselves. I'm such a child of the 70s and 80s. Right, to see if their technique is up to snuff. Excuse me. They just bang away, literally, on their technique or on their lifts until something feels off, or until that feels off sensation turns into a pop or a crack, followed by full blown pain. Right, sometimes radiating that drops you to the floor. So they do crazy, stupid things like Hail Hitler military presses. Right, so it's a military press that doesn't finish over your head, but it finishes out front. Same thing with the snatch. Or they do rounded lower backs on swings and snatches, which, unbeknownst to you, makes you look like a dog tucking its tail between its legs, right? Or how about squats, where the insides of your knees actually kiss or your tailbone tucks as you squat into the hole? Well, you may or may not know what I mean. But most certainly you probably have a friend, right, who does that sort of thing. So, look, at the end of the day, the key to both short-term and, more importantly, long-term success and health, which is what we're all after here, right? Nobody wants to die sooner, right, or end up in a nursing home. The key to both short-term and long-term success is to take the time to discover, practice, and routinely use the right kettlebell techniques. This goes both for single kettlebell work and double kettlebell work. Now, most likely at first, you won't be able to do as much work as you can now when you dial it back and learn these new techniques or the proper techniques. But the work you will do, it will be much higher quality. It will use more of the right muscles and at the right times and less of the wrong muscles at the wrong times, which means your body won't be fighting itself, right? You will see the results you're looking for sooner instead of barely at all, and you won't be as sore as you typically are, or, as I say, sore in the wrong places. By the way, that also, being sore in the wrong places, also impedes your recovery. I think we'll talk about that more in our next video. So that being said, do yourself a big favor this year if you haven't done it already. Slow down this month and spend some time refining your technique. Resist the urge to rush your reps, do as much work as possible, and beat your numbers from the last training session, okay? So what's one of the most practical steps you can use starting today that you can take from this video? Well, it's this. Add pauses in the middle of your reps. Okay, so what does that look like? Well, you pause in the bottom of your squat, making sure your posture and your position is spot on. Okay, you pause in the rack after a clean and before your press. You pause in the lockout or the overhead position after a press. You pause again in the rack after a press and before your next clean. Okay, or if you're snatching, right, you pause in the lockout or the overhead position, whatever you want to call it, after each and every snatch. And that's just naming 5. I'm pretty sure you can come up with some others on your own. Okay. So now, what if you don't know what the right techniques are, or you're not 100% sure? Well, I recommend you do one of two things, if not both of these things, right? For the first, if you're not sure what single kettlebell technique should look like or should feel like, then grab yourself a copy of the Big 6 for single kettlebell work. All right. You can actually get some new training programs with it, right? I'll leave a link to that in the video description below. And second, use Kettlebell Strong to upgrade your double kettlebell technique, and use the near legendary Strong program to take your strength to the proverbial next level this coming year. Okay. Now, I will also, by the way, leave a link to that in the video description below this video. Now, next time, We'll cover what to do when no matter what or how hard you try, you just can't seem to get your body into position when working on these new kettlebell techniques, and why this might actually be the single best thing you can do for yourself this upcoming year. All right. So in the meantime, if you found this video helpful, click the like button, smash the subscribe button, share it with a friend, leave me a comment section about techniques and technique training and injuries that you've had from being stupid with weightlifting like I was, or from previous sports that have affected your kettlebell training. All right. Until next time, my friend, stay strong.